This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benerofe, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, Westchester, and the world. And this is John Bailey with White Plains Week, and we express regret at any pain we will be causing you in the next 28 minutes of action. It was John Bailey with Jim Benerofe, my partner for 16 years, and Peter Katz since
you may call this action news. I think a lawyer might call it actionable news.
Actionable news. May it not be today, right, folks? And right now, Jim, give us the headlines. Give it to us.
Okay. City of White Plains appeals the Judge Lefkowitz decision. She called for the Common Council to vote on the French-American School of New York Ridgeway Country Club campus plan. Record electric usage set Saturday, August 13th in New York City, 11,855 megawatts, due to 96-degree heat and 60% humidity, will affect green energy price adversely. Dr. Paul Freed, White Plains Superintendent of Schools, will not be back to serve as superintendent when school starts. No word on when he may return. School district analyzes its performance on the new assessment tests school children took last June. Wendy Long, Republican candidate for U.S. Senator in the race against Charles Schumer, points out Schumer is not endorsing at this time the reappointment of Preet Bharara as U.S. Attorney. The Lavanos family, owners of City Limits and 6 other restaurants, to hold a fundraiser for Greek refugees September 29th.
Thank you, Jim. And we'll go right to the Rolo newsreel. And of course, those are the dandelions growing on the former Ridgeway Country Club last spring, but there has been a sprout in the legal situation, and that sprout is the fact that the City of White Plains appealed the Judge Lefkowitz decision, and this is a picture of that, the beginning of that appeal. And generally, the appeal, and I'm reading from it right now, and I quote, "The appeal from the May 11th order raises important issues concerning separation of powers between courts and municipal governments. In this case, the Supreme Court has in effect ruled that it may order the City of White Plains to discontinue and demap a public street and then sell that street to facilitate FASNY's proposed private development. As detailed, such a directive flies in the face of a well-established line of cases which hold that the decision of whether or not to discontinue a public street is a plenary legislative matter not subject to judicial review."
Now, some will say that that's not what Judge Lefkowitz ordered at all. Some will say that what she really ordered was for the Common Council to vote yes or no on the actual site plan that the French-American school submitted. The Common Council had voted not to close Hathaway Lane in a separate vote, and then they were, after voting on the proposal to close Hathaway Lane in order to facilitate traffic as part of their construction plan, They would then vote separately on the site plan approval itself.
Yes.
This project requires what's called a special permit, and special permits are at the discretion of the Common Council. But having voted no on the Hathaway Lane issue, they decided to table the site plan vote and actually did not vote. And so the French-American School went to court. Judge Lefkowitz said, you need to vote on this, and so I set a deadline by which you have to vote.
And they did.
And they did not, and so the city appeals her decision. Typically, we can expect it to take perhaps a year for the state Court of Appeals to hear this, if they hear it at all.
Yeah, but they could expedite it if they do choose
They
to
could.
hear it. Jim, what's your feeling about this?
Well, I think that the main issue here is the time and that they should vote. I think that the council does not want to vote. I think they feel that if they vote yes, they're in trouble. If they vote no, they're in trouble. I don't. It's a total no-win situation, and I think they're fair. As far as they dwelled in their response on the demapping of Hathaway Lane, there are other things that they could do that are very simple. One of the things is they could put up gates on a section of the road that open and close, and they could keep them closed.
I think part of the concept was to make it a part-time closure. Part of it was that, well, we can always have just what Jim said, a gate so that emergency apparatus can get in if necessary, or it could be used if we have to use it at some time. Another thing that they could have done in moving forward and voting on the site plan is, if they approved it and Hathaway Lane was an issue, they could then make the approval conditional upon the French-American School finding some way to comply with whatever it is the city wanted them to comply with. Now, one of the issues that was raised on the Hathaway Lane thing was that closing Hathaway Lane, they say, was something that originated with the city. It was the city's idea to help alleviate traffic concerns by closing it. And so part of the argument that the French-American School made was, all we did here was comply with what the city wanted. So how could the city say no to what they told us to do?
Right. Well, therein lies the tale. We'll never understand why that vote happened.
The city closes streets all the time for various things and to benefit certain businesses.
Well, I know, yes, they do that. Mamaroneck Avenue often is closed for downtown events. They close.
But they do legislate.
They close Court Street once a week to hold a farmers market. So you know, it's not demapping streets, making a through street into a paper street for some reason, or maintaining paper streets without really building the streets over years. It happens all the time. What I think what we're in for here is much more legal wrangling on this
protracted legal wrangling.
Well, I think what's happening is they're dragging this thing out and dragging it out, and they're not going to vote because the next election will be coming up. They won't vote because the election after that is coming up, and they're just going to keep going and going.
They'll vote on it after next November.
Who knows?
Maybe.
Well, actually, this November the election is coming up, and that keeps going on.
And
you know, we've said previously on this program that things are kind of bizarre in this presidential election.
Kind of. It's great stuff. I can hardly wait for the movie about Mr. Trump on this campaign, can't you?
Well, you know, this week, after saying that he's not going to be pivoting, there won't be any changes.
Wait, you need your appropriate introduction. Could we have the introduction, please, to this exclusive live segment?
What?
Trump Today and Clinton and Friends. Peter, take it away.
Why, thank you for the introduction. That's marvelous, John. You can't make this stuff up.
Better than Douglas Edwards.
Yeah, anyway, so after saying that he won't pivot, Donald Trump has had a shakeup in the campaign, partly, I think, partly because Paul Manafort is about to find himself in a whole lot of hot water It has been alleged now that he was acting as a foreign agent for a foreign government and doing lobbying work in this country without registering with the government as a lobbyist, as law requires him to do. So Trump has brought on board a fellow named Stephen Bannon, who had been running a radical, far right website called Breitbart News, and it's not only ultra-conservative, but ultra-conservative. In fact, the site published an article in which they said that Bill Kristol, the very well-known and respected conservative commentator who's in newspapers, on television all the time, is not far enough right for them. In fact, they called Bill Kristol a renegade Jew. That'll give you an idea of some of the stuff this website publishes. It is commonly publishing things white supremacist in nature, bigoted in nature, anti-Semitic in nature. And so this fellow, Stephen Bannon, has been hired on as
He's cleaning up his act,
what's
right?
called the CEO of the Trump campaign.
Trump's act. Right.
Another person, Kellyanne Conway, who has been a Republican pollster, has been hired on as a strategist. The interesting thing is that both of these people who now are running the Trump campaign have never run a political campaign before.
Hey, they can join the club. There's a lot of people who appear to have run a presidential campaign working for Mr. Trump.
In the last, this is interesting. Thank you very much for this.
Just in.
We have, yes, this
just in. I've
folks.
always wanted to say that.
There is a report which came in as we are doing the show that Paul Manafort has resigned from the Trump campaign. As of 30 minutes
just
ago.
Just before we went on the air.
Wow.
Now,
here
you have it, folks. Forget it. Eat your heart out, Journal News.
Anyway, so for the past few speeches, Trump has been reading off of a teleprompter. He said in one speech, now he had been called upon to apologize for some of the more ridiculous and outrageous things he had said. And he said in one speech that he sometimes did not choose the right words. He said he has regrets if he has said anything that caused anyone pain, but he did not apologize for anything.
Yes, and once again, we regret for any pain we cause you by this program.
On the other side of the coin, we have found out now that regarding Hillary Clinton's use of a private server, the Clinton campaign now says that Colin Powell advised her to use a private server.
Oddly enough, a Republican, isn't it?
Interesting. They also say that a letter being circulated, purportedly from Clinton's doctor, saying that she is terminally ill, is a fake. Fox News, on the Sean Hannity show this past week, did about an hour on Hillary Clinton's health, using what is obviously, to me, doctored video, where they took a shot of her laughing with reporters and continually looped it to make it appear as if her head was shaking uncontrollably.
Yeah, that's kind of really, that's a trick from college TV.
Some of the things which have been going on here have just been absolutely unprecedented for the American political scene.
Yes, it really is. I'm tired of it, and we have 11 and a half weeks to go.
Let's get on to the issues. Let's get some clear differentiation of the candidates based on issues, not based on all of this nonsense.
It is nonsense.
Now, some will say that actually they're doing a public service here by doing this stuff because you get to see what the real candidate is like, what the real person is like.
Right. No engagement. Now, can we have the next slide, please? The school board met this past week on Monday evening, and at the outset of the meeting, interim superintendent of schools, Timothy Connors, announced that he would be continue as interim superintendent in September because Superintendent Paul Freed still is unable to return to his duties, and there has not been any indication as to when that is going to happen.
We know there is a health issue involved, but we do not know the nature of the health issue. It apparently was a sudden onset health issue.
Yes, this just happened in May, late May.
It happened rather quickly and also rather quietly, I might add.
Yeah.
The school folks were not exactly forthcoming with the information
Well,
here.
I think a lot of that has to do with respect towards Dr. Freed.
Initially, Tim Connors was brought in as interim superintendent on what was to be a temporary basis.
Then it was July.
Initially, John was told that it may just be a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Now the couple of weeks has stretched on into a couple of months,
Right.
and there's really no firm date. So we can only express our best wishes for a speedy recovery from whatever it is that has been afflicting
or
Dr.
a resolution to whatever situation is causing this. Now, next on the agenda at the Board of Education was they discussed their analysis of the ELA test scores and the math test scores from the June assessments, which we've already told you about.
You remember last week, John gave you a pretty shocking rundown, actually, of the White Plains school results, and comparing some of them to the results in New Rochelle, and that really is disappointing when you do that.
You'll see their
comparison.
Analysis of it.
But this is what the school system came up with. This was some of the graphics from the presentation they gave.
Yeah, and here's the cohort. Now, a cohort is the same class followed over 3 years.
People who are essentially the same.
And you can see that in grades 3 to 5 in ELA, they improved from about 29% proficient up to 33%, and in grades 4 to 6, they improved again by the same amount. And in grades 5 to 7, it was a mixed result. And then in grades 6 to 8, the middle school, they are doing quite well in this last year. They're up almost 9%. So perhaps the grade 6 and 7 upgrading work has really helped.
Maybe they are making some progress somewhere, but
that's still the 35% level.
It's not dramatic, and you know, some of these numbers look a bit like the numbers Donald Trump is getting in the political polls.
That's true. Unfortunately, these are far more serious for us who use the school district and everybody. They should look at this. In White Plains, the Spanish, the Latino, and black students are getting doubled by the white students in performance. 75% of the white students are proficient and in grade 4, and it speaks for itself. The lower levels there, as you can see, are the black and Hispanic students, and Jessica O'Donovan admitted Monday night that this is a problem that they're continuing to address.
Now, Jessica O'Donovan
is the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction. Thank you. Should have mentioned that. And now, let's move to the next slide. Now, the district did say that of the ones that are in the proficiency group, the most proficient are the ones who are economically not disadvantaged. And look at the difference here. But this has always been a case. It's not new. You know?
No, it's not new, but it does perhaps start to explain something. You just can't approach the educational issues in a vacuum. It's not just education, but there are other environmental and family factors that play into whether a child is going to achieve what he or she should be achieving.
Now here's the next slide should show the regional comparison to other school districts. Now White Plains used to be is even with New Rochelle, Terrytowns in the elementary proficiencies. However, but will elementary performance continue its apparent progress? There is the 3, 4, and 5 results. And as you can see, White Plains is holding its own against the other similar school districts.
I don't know. It looks as if they're slightly consistently behind Rochelle and
well,
even
particularly in the
Tarrytown.
8th grade.
Yeah.
Particularly in the 8th grade prior to getting into high school. Now in math, we have slightly a strange result. The White Plains math proficiencies show a real mixed bag. The whites double passing rates of blacks and Latinos, and the economic disadvantage factor is also in effect. Those are the 2 inset slides. But the math performance still a little bit better, but behind in the other mixed bag there, and we don't quite understand that. Now, let's take a look at the next slide, and this is the math cohort data. In the elementary schools, 3 to 5, you have elementary success. In middle school, which is kind of classic, they stumble. And in the 8th grade, when you allow the 8th graders to take the 8th graders who they deem able to take the Regents exam, they went up considerably to 52%. Now, that intrigues me. Does that mean the Regents is easier than the math proficiency test? I think that's something that has to be asked.
I don't know. I always found the Regents exams to be pretty difficult. You, Jim, did you have good luck?
Well, I never took Regents exams because I went
you went to private school.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay, so that means you don't have a Regents diploma. So I'm not going to hire you for anything.
Absolutely not.
Well, that just shows you we were an equal opportunity show.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Jim, what's your... do we want to show the comparison in math with the other districts?
Do we dare?
We are behind New Rochelle and the Tarrytowns in elementary, and behind Elmsford, New Row, and the Tarrytowns in middle school. I mean, this is intriguing to me.
I don't know.
Now, why is this tied to our bad reading skills?
I don't know. I don't know. But Jim, you were starting to say something about your take on this whole business.
Things have got to be improved, that's for sure.
Yes. No kidding. Been going on for 15 years.
I think that probably part of the problem that exists today is, well, first of all, we're talking about math, but I'm just going to focus a little bit on English. The reliance on the internet and computers and stuff like that, kids aren't talking. And I think that's affecting the way they're able to respond on tests.
And understand.
Yeah.
Understanding is key. Now, I asked Jessica O'Donovan, the Director of Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, if she felt the content on the assessments, ELA and math, was easier this year. She said, "No, I do not feel the content was easier on either assessment this year. I believe our hard work in K-2 literacy instruction during the last several years and the untimed nature of the tests positively impacted our results in ELA in the elementary level, particularly in grades 3 and 4. Many students had trouble completing the ELA assessment in the past." So that was her first take on it. We hope to have an interview with her within the next month on this whole issue.
Well, you know, maybe they'll graduate some kids from the White Plains schools who will know enough about mathematics to try to figure out how to make Obamacare work, because just this week, Aetna said, we're getting out. We're not going to be writing anymore. We can't make money under Obamacare. They're the third insurance company to say that they're going to drop out, and 3 out of 5. You only have 5 insurance companies participating in these exchanges that they have nationwide. So that sets the stage for something that has to be done to improve the state of Obamacare and the future. Aetna says they lost $300 million on it just last year. So
somebody has to pay more because the insurance companies don't want to pay.
And the Department of Justice has decided that it doesn't want to pay for private operators to run prisons. After a 10-year experiment, that has changed, and that has caused the stocks of a couple of private operators of prisons
time to get the lobbyists
tank.
busy. Time to get the lobbyists busy to save the private prisons, don't you think?
And as if the Obamacare issues weren't enough, President Obama has been criticized this week for remaining on his vacation at Martha's Vineyard while the people in Louisiana are suffering from horrific floods.
How ironic.
Now, it's a great issue for the Republicans and a great issue for the campaigns that are going on, but actually it turns out that the governor of Louisiana has asked the White House not to have the president come down to visit with people because he says, and I happen to know this from having covered presidents in the past, that when a president comes to town, they have to take a lot of resources away just to protect the president.
Yeah, he makes a good
point. In the
point.
case of the governor of Louisiana, he says, I'd have to take 400 to 500 first responders off the job of helping people deal with the floods to put them on the protection of the president. And that's something that is not the right thing to do. So he said that the president, he said he's been in touch with President Obama on the phone. He talks to Valerie Jarrett, Obama's chief advisor, every day. He said the federal government has gone above and beyond its responsibilities in sending help down there. But Obama himself, he should stay away for maybe another week or so.
Well, the president could do a flyover. That's what George W. Bush did.
And you know what criticism George W. Bush took because of a famous picture showing him in the comfort of Air Force One looking down upon the people who were suffering on the ground.
Right.
Anyway,
the
Olympics, big story there. It turns out the story about the
another American disgrace.
The four Olympic swimmers being mugged at gunpoint. Turns out it was a phony story. They made up the story in order to try to cover up their vandalism of a gas station restroom.
They broke down the restroom door.
Unbelievable.
Allegedly.
What a week. You know, just when you think you've heard it all.
Yeah, we mention these because these are things that just really strike the consciousness of the issues that have to be dealt with by the next president.
Yeah,
really important, hard issues, including the local education issues.
Hey, you know, something came up in the Senate race, which is coming up. They've got, the Republicans have a gal running against, gal, that's not very nice, have a young woman running against Charles Schumer. And so she is criticizing Schumer because Schumer has declined to support the reappointment of Preet Bharara as the federal attorney.
Has not supported him.
Has not come out and
answered the question.
This time, he hasn't declined.
Yeah.
No, he hasn't declined. So, however, it's the first time we've heard from her. Now, back in 1948, something happened this week. Want to tell us about it, Peter, in 10 seconds?
Yeah, it all began. Douglas Edwards in the News started 68 years ago this week on CBS with First Network television newscast. And you can blame him for the rise of White Plains Week. That's the way it opened, with what used to be a teletype, typing out Douglas Edwards with the news.
John Bailey, good night for White Plains Week.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.